So I recently just did a trivia on my Instagram stories. I've been having a lot of fun with that. I put up trivia questions and it actually helps me analyze the audience to figure out what I think is more beneficial to you guys. I personally think people that watch my videos are much more focused on trying to become a much higher skill level angler and not typically just trying to start something, although I do have videos for that. But an interesting little thing popped up is I said, what treble hook has a higher hookup ratio, an EWG or a round bend? And believe it or not, almost 60% of the people said EWG, which is incorrect. It's actually a round bend. And I came to realize after doing more research that the vast majority of the fishing industry is very confused about treble hooks. This may sound boring to you, and you may say, I'm a guy that gets out 1 or 2 times a month. I don't care. I don't really need that. But I'll tell you what, I think it's way more important for the guy that fishes 1 or 2 times a month to make sure he gets the fish that he hooks or she hooks and lands them that time versus the person like myself that gets the option to fish every day. But I have this knowledge and I'm going to share it with you guys. So let's break down treble hooks and what you really need to know to hook up and land more fish. So let's start off with the EWG style treble hook. Take a look at that hook. Notice anything interesting? Well, you notice that from the hook point to the bottom of the round portion, right where the hook starts to bend back, the throat of the hook typically on EWGs doesn't go as deep, and the hook point starts to come back towards the eye. If I align this screwdriver right there, you'll see that this portion between the eye and the hook point, if I was to go all the way out to here, if I had that long of a screwdriver, you would see that the point would meet the eye, and that's probably somewhere around I'm guessing like a 77-degree angle-ish. I'm going to throw up some illustrations just to show you guys. I looked that up. I'm not just guessing that off the top of my head. Now, you're also going to notice on the vast majority of EWGs, that's that extra wide gap, is they're typically shorter shank, and that's just the backbone of the hook, how long that is. And I'm going to grab a round bend here for you and show you the same sort of thing here. On the vast majority of round bends, they have a longer shank. The throat from the point to the bend, it's a deeper throat. And there's a reasoning for this too. And if you look, if I align that screwdriver with that hook point, you can see if I continue full long out here, this hook point is never going to line up. It's never going to meet the eye of that hook. So what happens is it has a bigger bite where if a fish swipes at it, they're going to get hooked more often. So why would we even use an EWG style treble? Well, the reality is with that hook point pointing back towards the backbone of that hook, the shank of that hook, it's actually harder for a fish once they get hooked on an EWG to shake it around and leverage themselves off the hook. But there's a basis and a reason and a scenario for both of these hooks that you must know, and let's break that down. All right, let's explain the scenario here. Let's imagine I'm throwing like this Bill Lewis ATV crankbait right here. They're slapping at it. I'm not hooking a ton of fish. Well, it does come stock with EWG style trebles on there. Now, typically, if the fish is engulfing your whole bait, grabbing it, an EWG is by far the best way to go because, like I said, they can't leverage it off. But if fish is slapping at it or nipping at it, a round bend, like I have on the back here, is definitely the way to go. And the longer the shank allows it to get away from the bait more. If the fish comes up and just swipes at it, the longer the shank gives you that additional reach to hook those fish. And like I said, the round bend has a higher hookup ratio, but not a better hookup to land ratio. To where you can see I actually have a combination of the two. I have an EWG on the front, and the reason why if they engulf that whole bait and they get that hook, I know my hookup to land ratio is better. If they're swiping at it, right there, I have that round bend on the back. Okay, another thing too, an EWG typically on a bait that's making contact with structure and cover is a little less weedy and a little less snag heavy. You're going to get more snags with a round bend versus an EWG. And you can see I also have the shorter shank on there behind that front lip, so it's never going to hang on that lip. And as I'm coming through timber, this is the hook that's typically going to be closest to making contact. If I am getting snagged a lot, I will switch to a new style EWG that a lot of people are catching on to, and I'll show you that BKK Spear new EWG. It's kind of like a crossover in between the two. So let's jump to a top water bait. You can see round bends, okay? Round bends on there. Why would that be? A topwater bait is typically walking back and forth in the water column. They're not getting a good look. They're swiping at it a ton. So round bends, hook them more often. Now, you can see something funny that I did here, and I'll explain that. But this round bend, like the spear with the longer shank, is very useful for right here. I didn't have them in the boat that day. I was catching stripers on this one. So I actually took the stock hooks off of there and I tied braid swivels instead, because also, like I said, with round bends, the hookup to land ratio is not as good as an EWG. So a braid loop allows the fish to turn around 3 or 4 times before it binds and can ever leverage the hook off themselves. So that's a little trick. You don't need to do that. If you're a tournament angler, you should absolutely be tying your treble hooks with leftover braid that you have. Don't waste it. So I'm going to grab a big topwater bait, and I want you guys to think to yourself right now, is it going to be EWG or round bends? Got it? Here we go. I got a lunker punker. What is that? That is clearly a spear round bend, a BKK spear round bend, feather round bend on the back. It's a lot of real estate on that bait. They can hit anywhere they want on this. They may come up and broadside it. An EWG is only good if they're mouthing the whole bait, if they're getting the whole bait. If they're slapping at it, a round bend is by far the way to go. I should probably tie some 80-pound braid loops on here. I'm going to grab a line through swim bait, and I've got trap hooks right here. What do you notice again? Big bait, a lot of real estate. They're not mouthing the whole thing typically. A round bend is going to work to your favor to hook those fish. Now I'm going to do something interesting for you guys. Now this is a stock Bill Lewis scope stick. This is a smaller of the jerkbait lineup. Smaller, typically they're going to mouth it more, right? What do you notice? EWG style hooks on there. They're going to get it in their mouth. They're going to eat the whole thing. That's where the hookup to land ratio is going to be massively beneficial with that EWG. But if I notice I'm getting a lot of hits, or they're just swiping at it anytime I'm darting it, and they're not eating it on the paws, I'm going to switch to round bends or put a round bend feather on the back. So if you see me throwing a jerk bait with a feather on the back, typically that feather is going to be a round bend, because I'm trying to get them to focus in on it a little bit better and eat it at that point. So let me break down a new BKK style treble hook that's a hybrid between the both round bend and EWG, and I'll explain why. This is the EWG I was telling you guys about. This is the Spear 71 Super Slide Coating by BKK. And I'll explain why I think this is kind of the best of both worlds. You do have the shorter shank, so it's not long shank. If you feel like the fish are swiping a ton, still going with the round bend long shank is going to be beneficial to you. But if you want a treble hook in general, that's going to cover everything. You can see right here, the gap is bigger than most, okay? And you're going to notice from the portion where the hook point goes to the bend of the hook, that's the throat, how deep it drops back in, is much more like a round bend. And you're going to notice that the hook point doesn't come back towards the eye nearly as much as a lot of EWGs. It still does, so you have some of the benefits of an EWG, but a lot of the bite benefit, to where if a fish swipes at it, they're going to get it just like a round bend at the same time. So I honestly think this is probably the best crossover treble hook on the market right now for all bass fishing purposes in general. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Don't think this is overly complicated. Once you know it in your head, it's just going to help you put more fish in the boat and become a better angler on average. You know, once you know these key things to do to execute on the water, you're going to be holding up a lot more big fish, and you're going to be really satisfied that you went out there and accomplished your goal that day. So hopefully this helps you out, guys. I'm Nick, the Informative Fisherman. Make sure to drop me a follow if you can.